In today's podcast, we're going to do something a little bit different. You see, one of the common questions I get asked is, Michael, what's your net worth? This is a question I guess many people are curious about, and I get why. However, rather than simply providing you with a number, I want to take you behind the scenes and share the principles, the strategies, the mindset that have helped me achieve the financial freedom I enjoy today. We're going to talk about the stages of wealth creation, the power of leverage, the lessons I've learned, sometimes the hard way, over 5 decades in property. And joining me for the conversation is Brett Warren, Director at Metropole, who's going to turn the tables and ask me some of the questions maybe you've been wondering about. And the intention of today's show is not to gloat, not to boast, not to show off, but to give you inspiration to build your own net worth. So welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Hi, it's Brett Warren here, and today's episode is going to be a little different and frankly a lot more personal, because today I got to turn the microphone around and interview Michael Yardney. I'm sure you know that he's recognised as one of Australia's leading property experts, but he recently published a blog that's been getting a lot of attention. It's called The Truth About Michael Yardney's Net Worth. And let me tell you, it wasn't just a puff piece about dollars and figures. Michael opened up about wealth, what wealth really means to him, what mistakes he's made along the way, and social media too has completely distorted the meaning of wealth. So in today's episode, we're going to dig a bit deeper and get into why building a big bank balance isn't the end goal, and what Michael would do differently if he could start again, and how true wealth often has nothing to do with money at all. So let's get into it, Michael. Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brett. This is going to be a little bit interesting. I'm a little bit nervous about all that, but let's see how it goes.
Well, it is good to see you on the hot seat, Michael. I'm not going to lie. So I'm looking forward to this as well. So Michael, first question. You often get asked about your net worth. Why don't you share an exact number? I know I always get asked how many properties I own. Why don't you share that number?
Because it's not about the number. In my mind, it's about the journey, the lessons, the process. I know people want to compete, and you can see people on social media all the time. There's the young guys who say, I've got a Lamborghini, but interestingly, he's not driving it. I think he lost his license. There's the guys who've got $35 million worth of property at the age of 30. They bought 10 properties in 10 minutes. But I've been around long enough to see, I used to play a game. I've got in the back here, all the old Australian property investor magazines, the hard copy ones. And once a year, I used to, with a friend, pull them out and say, where are they now? Because a lot of those people haven't been around for a long time. It hasn't worked. So net worth can be fleeting. But if we can talk properly about this today, the principles are more important. And to me, net worth isn't the equivalent of wealth. It used to be. I came from a very poor background. We didn't go on Christmas holidays like our parents' friends did. My parents didn't have the first car till I was 9 or 10 when they had my sister. My parents used to argue about money. So I wanted money and I chased money, and that didn't help me in the first half of my life. And now that I've got a better understanding of true wealth, Brett, I'm much happier inside. So to me, wealth is money plus the health. No use having money if you haven't got your health. Money plus the ability to keep learning and keep growing. Very important to have money plus somebody to love you, and you love somebody. I'm very lucky with my wife and my kids and my grandkids. Money plus spirituality, money plus the ability to contribute and give back. And we give a lot of money back to charity. Net worth, you don't need as much as you probably think for some people who are chasing money like I did. And on the other hand, some people are going to need to get a little bit more. So I'll tell you a little secret. I wanted to be a millionaire by the age of 30. That was a lot of money then. Millionaire's nothing today. It's an average house or it's a double garage in Sydney.
Yeah.
I didn't get there by 30. I got there by, I think, 35 or something like that. But when I got there, then what? It actually, I wasn't happy inside yet.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a time when you're younger that net worth is really, really important. And I think, as you said before, as you kind of grown and realize your family and spiritualization and things like that as well. But do you ever feel pressure to prove success with numbers? Because I think a lot of those people on Instagram and in the magazines and stuff, they're using those numbers to prove their success. Do you ever feel that pressure?
I used to. I used to have to prove myself. I had a difficult relationship as I grew up with my father, and I thought I was never good enough. That's the sense he gave me. So I had to prove myself to my father, my friends. And I did that in a number of different ways. And that sort of pulled down the first half of my life when I realized it wasn't actually getting me where I wanted. So proving doesn't help any. I had to be satisfied within myself. And once I did, and once the requirement for the money was for better purposes than just proving. In other words, to help my family, to help my grandkids, to help the community, to feel comfortable to be able to do what I want to do, nothing to do with other people. I got a sense of comfort inside. I wasn't driven as much. I wasn't chasing as much. But I guess, if we're being open, it took me longer in my life than I would have liked to get to that stage, Brett.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the basics, but how do you define net worth and why is it such an important metric?
Well, I guess net worth is simply the value of your assets minus your liabilities. It's one measure of financial health. And while many people chase cash flow, true wealth's built by growing an asset base. So we've spoken in previous podcasts before about how the wealthy people in Australia build an asset base first and then they move to cash flow so that they can get up each morning and decide what they want to do and do what they want to do with whoever they want to do for however long. So most people focus on income
Yeah.
because that's what they think they need. And the answer is, I guess they do need it, but they do it in the wrong order. Set growth first and then income, not the other way around. So most people think they're going to, just by getting more income, become wealthy, but they tend to spend more. They get taxed more. We see lots of professionals come to Metropole, high earning professionals. In many cases, a lot of medical practitioners who work long hours, who look after other people well, do a great job, but don't look after themselves, Brett. They got nice cars, they've gone on holidays, they got a nice house, they pay the school fees, but they don't have much net worth.
No, that's right. What do you think is the most common misconception people have about building wealth?
Well, I think the common one that's propagated a lot more lately by social media is that it's related to cash flow. They
Mm,
chase cash flow rather than asset growth.
yeah, and the shiny
So
new toy.
net worth is really, if you didn't have the cash flow, what have you got in assets? Now, you can't eat those, but if you've got the right sort of assets, you can borrow against them or you can sell them and you can live off that as well.
Michael, we've talked about wealth creation. You've been through that cycle. Can you talk to me a little bit about the stages of that wealth creation journey? Can you walk us through those stages? I think you said there's 3 or 4.
Sure. Well, I guess the first one is educating yourself, learning a little bit about it, because we recently did a podcast on the 15 myths of wealth creation. And if you follow what most people follow, if you do what most people do, if you listen to who most people listen to, you're going to get the wrong sort of education. So stage one is understanding what's going on, then putting a plan together and accumulating wealth. So the second stage is the asset accumulation stage, where you've got to build an asset base. How big does it need to be? How long will it take you? Well, that's very variable. And that's why at Metropole, we use very powerful software to help map it out for clients. And I know that the software that your team uses graphically has a lot of what if. So you can choose, if I buy a property in a trust or in my own name in this state or that state, or a commercial or residential. So we actually have to take them through the asset growth stage of their journey. And then once you got a sufficient asset base, and again, how do you know what that is? That's what our powerful software helps them understand what they can do with it. They then transition to the stage where they slowly lower their loan to value ratios. It may also be the time when they diversify to other assets. And then eventually you get to the cash flow stage where you can live off your property portfolio. And during that growth stage, I believe people should consider having 2 businesses. One is their main business, whether it's a profession, whether it's a job, whether it's an income that their business that they own, which is a cash flow business, to support the second business, which in my mind is an asset growth business, their property business. And that takes many years, often a couple of decades, and then you eventually can live off your cash flow. So it's a process. It's not an event. And the properties you buy have to be part of the stage, the plan, the strategic plan. That's why we always start with a strategic plan at Metropole. So when clients come and see our wealth strategist, we find out where they are, where they want to go, and then we help them plan to become the people they plan to become, and telling them what to do and what not to do, and having the right structures around them as well. It's a long process, Brett.
It is, and most people just focus on that last stage, don't they, and work out why and then they figure out they can't get there. So, look, what stage do you think is the hardest, and where do the investors get stuck the most?
Well, I guess if they get it right at the beginning, that 20, 30-year journey can be cut back considerably. Most investors get it wrong for the first 5, 10 years of their journey because they follow the dream of cash flow. They follow somebody on the internet. Now, there's some really, really good advisors on the internet. Sure, we've got a vested interest in our team at Metropole, are much more than just buyer's agents. We're wealth strategists and help our clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth. And there's definitely other very good organizations out there that do the same. And I know when I speak with them and you speak with our good professional colleagues, we're very frustrated by the new wave of so-called experts who have done a 3-week course and then go off and buy a property straight away. If you ask some of these buyers agents, what should I do? They're going to tell you to buy a property. So these investors, a long-winded answer is they get stuck by getting the advice from the wrong people.
What about personally, Michael? What was the hardest stage for you?
I think going back to what I initially said, I was chasing money, not cash flow, but I was actually building it for the wrong purpose. I was actually building it to, I guess, impress people who weren't as fussed about what I was up to than I thought they were.
It's funny, most people want cash flow to impress people that don't even matter. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But look, obviously we talked about cash flow and most people focusing on cash flow as the starting point. Why is that such a common mistake?
I think they want immediate results. Cash flow too early in the stage is going to lead in general to lower capital growth. Residential real estate in general is a high growth, relatively lower yield investment. You need capital growth first to build the asset base, and then cash flow follows. But if you chase cash flow positive properties, property isn't cash flow positive or negative. It really depends upon how you finance it. So if you have no debt at all, then every property will be cash flow positive unless it's vacant land. On the other hand, since most people have to borrow, and even though interest rates are falling, they're still relatively high. If you buy a good property, yields aren't as high. There is a reason why some of the secondary properties are cheaper and give you better cash flow. They're cheaper because they're not as valuable.
Yeah, and they haven't grown in value. Absolutely. Look, obviously there's a right time and a wrong time to buy those kinds of properties. Is it all right to buy them early on or is it later?
So I think you've got to balance capital growth with cash flow because you need enough cash flow to keep you in the game to support your debt, but you also need to get the asset base. So at Metropole, part of our strategic plan is getting that balance right. And we help our clients buy time, not just properties, by having financial cash flow buffers. Now, I know a couple of weeks ago, a month or two ago now, we did a podcast where you explained about all the cash flow buffers. So if you haven't listened to that show, by the way, subscribe to this show wherever you're watching or listening to this so that you get episodes twice a week. But go back a couple of months to Brett's episode on the secret sauce that investors have, which is the cash flow buffer, because if we can buy people time, then they don't need the cash flow that they seem to feel they need because they've got the buffers there in case the cash flow dries up, the tenant moves out, interest rates change. But if you want leverage to grow, you need growth. And for that reason, you need capital growth.
Well, you mentioned leverage there, Michael, and one big theme in your article that we read there was obviously leverage. Can you explain the different types of leverage you've used?
Well, I think I leverage finance. In other words, I use equity in my properties to buy more properties. I leverage time. I don't do everything myself. I have an assistant, as you do. We've got people who help us there. So I leverage time. A lot of people just think leverage of money. I leverage relationships. We have good accounting, strategic people, finance people, legal people. I don't have to know it all. And I leverage mindset by actually still having coaches. We share Mark Creedon and Mastermind as a coach. I also still use Simon Bowen as a coach. The wealthy use leverage in all these four ways: time, relationships, mindset, and money to amplify their results.
And what do you think is the most misunderstood form of leverage?
Well, maybe the most misunderstood thing in finance leverage is that debt is bad, when in fact borrowing against appreciating assets is good. So we see a lot of people who've got significant equity in their homes but haven't used it to move forward and buy another investment property.
Did any one of those leverage types make a big breakthrough or a big difference for you?
Yeah, I think it was leveraging relationships. Brett, when I first started off, I thought I had to do it all myself. First of all, because I think I was cheap and didn't want to pay other people. I guess at that time there weren't as many other consultants around that I could have used. But once I actually realized the power of having other people in the team, it grew my results significantly. It also allowed me, by having mentors, to see my blind spots, because we all have biases. We all think we're rational when we make decisions, but we're not. So I leveraged relationships with wealth, and also having business coaches and personal coaches leveraging my mindset made a huge difference and gave me a sense of comfort, Brett.
Yeah, one of the things you told me early on, Michael, we're talking 20 years ago now, I'd kind of bought property in Perth at that time. I was from Perth, and it did exceptionally well because I bought a property that doubled within 3 years because of the mining boom. And one of the
Yeah.
messages you said to me is, be careful. For novice investors, be careful if you get it right the first time. Can you share why, and can you share also what happened with yourself?
Well, interestingly, I was in a similar situation. It was in the early 70s, and I bought a property. I went house with my parents, and it increased in value so much that within 2 years I could use equity against another property. Interestingly, Gough Whitlam, the Labor government, came into power. Inflation was high. Interest rates were high. But, Brett, I thought I was a genius.
Yeah.
I thought, gee, look how smart I am. And then we hit a recession and rising interest rates in the 80s. And boy, did that humble me. I learned the importance over time of having a strategy, because I didn't have a strategy. I bought close to where it was 2 streets away from the school I went to as a kid. It was behind the shopping centre where my mum went shopping. It was in my comfort zone.
Yeah, I think that's a really important lesson, particularly in the last 5 years, right? Because you pretty much could have bought anywhere and done pretty well. And I think things are about to change. So
Yes.
we'll probably talk about that later. But what's one mistake on your journey you'd take back if you could?
I think one of my early mistakes was buying commercial property too early in my career. What I did was buy two factories, 21 and 23 Dandenong Street, Dandenong. I still even remember the address, and they were leased to Newwood Furniture. Gee, that's a name I haven't heard in about 40, 50 years. They were manufacturing in Australia in those days. And I did it because that's what the big guys were doing. I was in the 70s. I was in my late 20s, and I didn't get the capital growth. I didn't know what I was doing, and it held me back, and I eventually sold those and then used the equity to do better things. So I got into commercial too early. So as you know, I've got a substantial commercial property portfolio, but it's got to all be part of the right stage. I'm sorry to keep coming back to it, but when our property strategists at Metropole put plans together for clients, we look at all the options: development, renovations, residential, commercial, and we actually see what is the right stage in the journey to put that together. So if you're interested in understanding that for yourself, I'm talking now not to you, but to the viewers and listeners, go to metropole.com.au and actually have a chat with one of our wealth strategists, where we can actually show you how you can achieve what you want and what not to do, as well as what you should do. And that talks about making, well, I guess it stops you making some of the mistakes I've made in the past.
Yeah, moving on to some of the strategy side of things now. And over time, you've developed your six-stranded approach, which is great. And what are the key elements of that?
Well, I had to learn these the hard way by making mistakes. So I got it right initially because the timing was right, and I invested in Melbourne, and I invested in a suburb that was gentrifying. And that first property that I went house with my parents and paid $18,000 for, I sold. So that was another mistake I made. I didn't know I could refinance. I sold when I got married, bought it back from my parents. We've since built 2 townhouses on it. I still own 17 Large Street, South Caulfield, which was started at $18,000 and is worth more like $4 million today. But along the way, I had to find a strategy to outperform the averages. So we really start with a top-down approach first to see which state we want to invest in, and we only invest in the capital cities. I do, and that's our recommendation for Metropole, even though there are opportunities everywhere, but we don't fight the big gorillas. And then within those locations, those states, we actually look for the locations that are going to outperform because they're gentrifying and because the people that are there, the demographics. And then when we find the right property, a long-winded answer to your six-stranded approach is we like to buy below intrinsic value. In other words, not buying off the plan or paying a premium. At the moment, in many parts of Australia, and particularly in Melbourne, that's easy to do because we know that replacement cost for apartments, for houses, for townhouses is much more than you buy paying for established properties. It's just a really unusual stage of the cycle where building costs have gone up, developers can't make margins doing it. So in fact, step one is buy below intrinsic value. That's easy. Buy in an area with long, strong term capital growth. And that's related to the demographics and more affluent people moving in. I also like buying properties with owner-occupier appeal. Not that we want to sell it to owner-occupiers, but that other people are going to be able to buy or going to want to buy similar properties, pushing up the value of mine. I want to buy a property with a high-ish land to asset ratio, recognizing that it's the land component that increases. Now, people say properties depreciate, and yes, they do, but in fact, the replacement cost of properties goes up as well. So, but still high land to asset ratio. And then something unique, something different, something a bit special. At the moment, you can rent anything out because of such low vacancy rates. But having been around this block a few times, there are times when vacancy rates are high. So if you've got a better aspect, if you've got a nice courtyard, if you've got a bigger balcony for your apartment, if you're in a good position, walkability, something unique about your property is important. And the strategy that I've used over the years is manufacturing capital growth. And that's the last strand. So I like buying properties to which I can add value through renovations or development. And each of those strands, Brett, de-risks my investments, which means if one or two things don't work for a period of time, the others will do the heavy lifting.
Also think by de-risking, you're also increasing the return, aren't you? Because you're
Yes, you
decreasing the
are.
risk. So I think that's really important. Which of the six strands do you think most investors tend to ignore or just get wrong?
Well, I think a lot of investors buy close to where they want to live, close to where they want to holiday. They go on holidays to Surfers Paradise and see something nice. And the local agents call them ice cream lickers. They're coming along there with the ice cream that they've got, or it's probably more yogurt nowadays, isn't it?
Yes,
The
yes, it
fancy
is.
yogurts.
That's right.
And so they buy emotionally rather than putting a plan, a strategy together.
Mark, you often say that property investment is a process, it's not an event. What do you mean by that?
Well, people think I'm researching when they're searching on the internet. That's not really doing research. People are now getting a lot of AI information, and there's various buyers agents who are coming out saying, I've got all the access to the AI. What they're doing is all getting the same information and herding their clients into much the same spots, pushing up properties above intrinsic value. So people don't recognize that property investment, and we've said this a few times, is a journey, a decade-long journey that requires patience and strategic decision making. So what most investors get wrong is they don't start with a plan. They start by buying a property. And that's because most people don't know how to create a plan. They don't. We pay quite significant license fees for the software that we use for our clients to help them plan to become the people they plan to become. So they actually don't have a strategy or a plan. And so therefore they get involved in get rich quick schemes that often make them disappointed.
Yeah, I think the important thing there, Michael, is helping people stay focused. And I know what we do is actually help them understand what they want to achieve. We then map out a path. But I think the key
Yes.
thing we also do is we actually sit down with them every 12 months because things change, things go better, things go worse. People lose jobs, people get pay rises, but we can keep them focused and we can continually check in on that. And I think that's a really good proven system. But are there any moments or is there any time recently or in the past where you've doubted your strategy?
Well, in the first half of my investment life, I didn't doubt my strategy, even though it was wrong at times, definitely wrong at times. That's because I had a big ego. And I guess that's one of the mistakes that people make. It's rationalizing things, cognitive biases, but confirmation bias. You spend lots of time doing homework and research and finding a property that you like. And so therefore you look for all the evidence to prove that you got it right rather than question whether you've got it right. So I guess for the first half of my life, investment life, and that's now 50 years or so because I'm in my 70s. No, I didn't doubt it, but I was wrong. And in the second half of my life, I'd eventually put a strategy together. And having been around the block a few times, I wasn't concerned that there were periods when the property values didn't grow because I knew that was just part of the way it worked.
Well, that might lead into my next question, Michael, around mindset and how important was that in building your net worth?
I think that's a huge thing. And that's why every show I include a mindset moment. And I know I get a lot of comments that people really enjoy those
Yeah.
because I think most people are held back by their limiting beliefs. I can't do that. It's too risky. That won't work for me. I did have to, and I mentioned it a while ago in this chat, that I had to shift from a scarcity mentality to an abundance thinking. So yes, the first part of my life, I was driven by scarcity and chasing money because I didn't have it and I didn't see it at home. My father's only financial plan was trying to win the lottery, which he never did. So therefore, when I went to Tony Robbins and Chris Howard, Landmark Education, and I believe they're still around, was a great course that Pam and I did as well, where we learned more about ourselves and learned to understand our limiting beliefs. And once I became comfortable in myself, not having to prove myself to others, and started to think abundance and there's enough for everybody, everything changed.
What's one belief you had to unlearn?
Guess it was partly that I'm not good enough, because that's one of the things I believed, because that's the sense I got from, let's call it, a very interesting father. And when I've learned I'm good enough and I'm okay and I deserve it, that made a big, big difference.
I know you're passionate about helping people create wealth, but you're also passionate about helping people develop that growth mindset. How do you help others do that?
Well, again, if all we did in these shows and in my blogs and in my writings and in my YouTubes was talk about the strategies of property, it's all out there. Sure, I've got fine-tuned and we've got it a bit different and a bit better to others. Why don't most people get wealthy? And it is because of their mindset. So that's why I've blended the talk together, the discussions together with mindset. Because I remember when I first started doing seminars, there'd be 300, 400, 500 people in the room, and there'd be a person at the front who heard something and they took action and did things, and 80% of the room did nothing. So then I did longer seminars. I did whole day ones, 2-day ones, 5-day ones, and it was the same result. A small group of people did something and the majority did nothing. And I realized the difference between the action takers and those who were left behind wasn't the knowledge, it was their mindset. And so that's why Rich Habits, Poor Habits, a book that I've written with Tom Corley, explains that, why I do the mindset message in these sessions, why I do the blogs and articles on Property Update, and then through my mentorship program, which is really about the science of getting rich, nothing to do with property or shares or stocks, but really about mindset, Brett.
Okay. Last one, Michael, for you. For listeners out there who want to follow in your footsteps, what's the first step they should take today? What's an actionable step they can take?
Well, I guess get educated and then build a plan. But the bottom line is you can't build that on your own when you're starting. So the next one would be surround yourself with people who've already achieved what you want. Now, again, it's very difficult in today's environment where the internet suggests lots of people have achieved things. Make sure they've actually kept it for a couple of cycles. And that's why we offer a strategic property planning service at Metropole. These are customized roadmaps to help you grow your wealth safely. We've mentioned it a few times during our chat today. If you want to do something, I know some people are going to say, oh, that's just self-serving. You're looking to do business. Our services don't suit everybody, but why not have a chat with a wealth strategist and see what you can do? Because if we can help you put a plan together, then we've been there. We've been around the block. We know where the landmines are. And even though the property market's doing really, really well at the moment, there's also some areas I'd be very cautious about and areas I'd avoid. So go to metropole.com.au. Yes, it is a self-serving plug, but it's done on purpose because I genuinely believe we've helped thousands of clients, haven't we, Brett, grow true wealth.
we have, Michael. And any final word for those cautious investors or any younger investors out there?
Well, the younger investor's real easy. You've got something that Brett and I haven't got. You've
Yeah.
got time on your side. Brett's got much more time than me. But the answer is it is hard. It's difficult. There's uncertainty out there. Do not let uncertainty be an excuse not to get into the market at the moment. Things were uncertain in 2020 when COVID came. But look at what happened when people took advantage of the opportunities that were there then. People are uncertain in 2022 when interest rates started going up. But look how Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, Canberra, not Melbourne, have actually grown. Darwin has grown significantly in value since then. Things were uncertain in 2006, 20 years ago, when we were seeing clients with Metropole. There's always uncertainty out there. You're not allowed to use that as an excuse because in this lucky country, there's multiple markets. There's always some opportunities.
Well, thank you, Michael. That was a really powerful conversation. It's refreshing to hear someone so accomplished, I guess, strip back the numbers and discuss what truly matters when it comes to wealth. If you're listening and you haven't read the blog yet, I'll leave it in a link in the show notes so you can have a look around. It may just change the way you think about success. And if you don't currently subscribe to Property Update, you really should. You may be missing out on something there. So, Michael, thank you. It was a pleasure to turn the tables and take control and put the pressure on you for a change.
It was actually quite interesting being on the other side, but it was fun. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks again.
You probably know that each show I introduce a property trivia question to give you, my listeners and viewers, an opportunity to win a hard copy of one of my best-selling books, Michael Yardney's Guide to Investing. Just go to propertytrivia.com.au. I'll leave a link in the show notes and enter your answer. And each week, 3 correct answers win a hard copy of one of my books. By the way, don't worry if you're listening to a slightly older episode. Your entry will count, and everyone who leaves a entry, correct or not, is still going to get an updated report. I've just updated a report that I think you'll find useful. Simple question this week. I want to make it easy for you. What's Australia's most expensive capital city in terms of median house price? What's Australia's most expensive capital city in terms of median house price? Go to propertytrivia.com.au, leave us your answer. You'll get a report and a chance to win a book.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's mindset message, I want to explain to you that easy has a cost. You know, it's funny, most of us spend our time trying to make things easier. We want less stress, less effort, less friction. But here's the paradox. The more you chase easy, the harder life actually becomes. Look, think about it. Exercising may feel hard in the moment. You've got to drag yourself out of bed, lace up your shoes, push through the discomfort. But what's harder, living in a body that's unfit, tired and full of aches and pains because you haven't moved, or doing that exercise? Mastering your craft is hard too. It takes years of deliberate practice, learning from failure and constantly improving. But having no valuable skills, well, that's far harder when opportunities pass you by and you feel stuck. Even those uncomfortable conversations, telling the truth, setting boundaries, addressing conflict, they're tough. But avoiding them, that leads to resentment, broken relationships, and a life of silent frustration. You see, it turns out that easy isn't free. Easy has a cost. And most of the time, the cost of easy is your future. So maybe the goal isn't to make life easy. Maybe the goal is to get better at doing the hard things now so life doesn't become harder later. Remember, short-term pain often leads to long-term gain, but short-term comfort, well, that often leads to long-term regret. So ask yourself today, what's the hard thing I've been avoiding, and what's the real cost of continuing to avoid it? Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen-to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this, or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Well, just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?